Today we're going over the most evil doctors in history. These are men who took an oath to do no harm and then did the exact opposite. And trust me, it gets dark. Number 1. H. Holmes, the Murder Castle. It's 1893 and Chicago is absolutely packed. The World's Fair has brought 27 million visitors to the city, all eager to see the wonders of the modern age. Electric lights, moving walkways, the world's first Ferris wheel. It's basically Disneyland before Disneyland existed. And across the street from all this wonder, a charming young doctor named Henry Howard Holmes is watching the crowds pour in with a big smile on his face. He's just finished construction on a hotel that takes up an entire city block. From the outside, it looks like any other building. Inside, it's a custom-built slaughterhouse. See, Holmes wasn't really interested in being a doctor. I mean, technically he was one. He'd graduated from the University of Michigan Medical School a few years earlier. But he wasn't in Chicago to heal people. He was there to kill them. And he'd spent years designing the perfect building to do it in. The hotel was an absolute maze. Over 100 rooms connected by hallways that twisted and turned in ways that made no sense. Some doors opened to brick walls. Others opened to nothing, just a 2-story drop straight down. Secret passages connected rooms that weren't supposed to exist. Some rooms had no windows at all. Others had gas lines piped into them that Holmes could control from his personal office. Oh, and he'd installed soundproof vaults. For privacy. Here's the creepy part. Holmes hired and fired construction crews constantly, sometimes after just a few days on the job. At the time, workers probably just thought their boss was a perfectionist or maybe kind of a jerk. In reality, Holmes was making sure nobody ever saw the full blueprint. Nobody except him knew what he was actually building. And what he was building was a nightmare. There was a greased chute that led from the upper floors directly to the basement. And the basement, that's where Holmes did his real work. Down there, he'd set up a dissection table, a full collection of surgical tools, and a crematorium large enough to destroy any evidence. There were also vats of acid and quicklime for the bodies that were too big to burn. Just normal basement stuff. So how did he get his victims? Simple. He was handsome, he was charming, and he owned a hotel across from the biggest tourist attraction in America. Young women traveling alone would check in and never check out. He'd romance them, sweet-talk them, take out life insurance policies on their lives, and then one night they'd find themselves locked in a room with no door handle while gas hissed through the walls. By morning, they'd be sliding down that greased chute to the basement. But here's the thing. Holmes wasn't just killing for fun. He was running a business. After murdering his victims, he'd strip the flesh from their bones, articulate the skeletons, and sell them to medical schools. Remember, he was a trained doctor. He knew exactly how much a human skeleton was worth on the black market. And in 1890s Chicago, nobody was asking too many questions about where the bones were coming from. Supply and demand, baby. Holmes operated his murder hotel for nearly 3 years. He might have kept going forever if he hadn't gotten greedy. See, the police didn't catch him for murder. They caught him for insurance fraud. He'd been running scams all over the country, and when investigators finally tracked him down in 1894, they decided to take a look at his hotel. What they found would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Bone fragments scattered across the basement floor, a blood-stained dissection table, the charred remains of who knows how many victims in that crematorium. The building was literally a house of horrors. The press immediately dubbed it the Murder Castle. Holmes became America's first serial killer. At least the first one anyone had ever heard of. He eventually confessed to 27 murders, though some estimates put the real number closer to 200. We'll never know for sure because, he burned most of the evidence. Holmes was hanged in Philadelphia on May 7, 1896. According to witnesses, his neck didn't snap cleanly. He dangled at the end of that rope for nearly 15 minutes, twitching before he finally died. The murder castle was torn down shortly after, but for years locals swore they could still hear screaming coming from where it once stood. Whether that's true or just a good story, I'll let you decide. Number 2. Dr. Marcel Petiot, the Nazi occupation butcher. It's Paris, 1941. The Nazis have taken over, and life for anyone Jewish or involved in the resistance has become a living nightmare. The Gestapo are everywhere. People are being rounded up and shipped off to camps. Families are desperate, absolutely desperate, to escape. And they'll pay anything to anyone who can get them out. Enter Dr. Marcel Petiot, a respected physician with a nice practice in a fancy part of town. Petiot seems like a good guy. Patients love him. But Petiot has a secret. He runs an underground escape network. For a price, he can smuggle you out of occupied France and all the way to Argentina. New identity, new life, no more Nazis. It sounds too good to be true, because it absolutely is. Petiot's escape network had exactly one destination, his townhouse at 21 Rue Le Sueur. He'd meet with desperate families, Jews fleeing persecution, resistance fighters with prices on their heads. He'd tell them to bring everything, all their cash, all their jewelry, all their gold, because they'd need it to start fresh in South America. He'd tell them to say goodbye to no one. Secrecy was essential, he'd explain. We can't risk the Nazis finding out. Then he'd sit them down and inject them with what he called vaccines required for travel to Argentina. The injections were lethal. Within minutes, his victims would be dead on his floor. Petiot would pocket their valuables, drag their bodies to the basement, and burn them in a custom-built furnace. He'd been a doctor long enough to know that fire destroys evidence, and nobody was going to miss people who were supposed to be fleeing to another continent anyway. It was, in a twisted way, the perfect crime. This went on for years. Petiot was killing people faster than the Nazis were deporting them, and nobody suspected a thing. Why would they? He was a doctor. He was helping people escape. The guy was a hero. Until March 1944. That's when neighbors started complaining about thick black smoke pouring out of the chimney at 21 Rue Le Sueur, and the smell. This horrible, horrible smell that wouldn't go away. Police forced their way into the townhouse and went down to the basement. What they found there would haunt them forever. 27 dismembered bodies, some still partially intact, others reduced to piles of bones and ash. A pit filled with quicklime. Suitcases stuffed with clothing that would never be worn again. And Dr. Marcel Petiot? Nowhere to be found. For months, Petiot was on the run. And here's where it gets really crazy. When he was finally captured, Petiot had the absolute audacity to claim that every single one of his victims had been Nazi collaborators. He said he'd been working for the resistance the whole time, executing traitors to France. He presented himself not as a murderer, but as a war hero who deserved a medal. The jury didn't buy it. Petiot was convicted of 26 murders, though investigators believed the real number was closer to 60. He was sentenced to death by guillotine. On May 25, 1946, Marcel Petiot walked to his execution with a smirk on his face. According to witnesses, he showed no fear whatsoever. When the blade dropped, it severed the head of a man who had turned human desperation into a business model. He'd charged people for the privilege of being murdered. Number 3. Josef Mengele, the Angel of Death. It's Auschwitz-Birkenau, May 1943. A train pulls into the camp carrying hundreds of prisoners from across occupied Europe. They've been packed into cattle cars for days with no food, no water, barely enough air to breathe. The doors finally slide open, and SS guards immediately start screaming at everyone to get out and form lines. After days in darkness, the prisoners stumble into the light, disoriented, terrified, not knowing what's about to happen. At the end of the platform stands a young SS officer in an immaculate uniform. He's wearing white gloves. He's whistling a tune by Wagner. He looks almost friendly. His name is Dr. Josef Mengele, and he's about to decide who lives and who dies. Selection was a simple process. Mengele would look at each prisoner for maybe a second or two, then point. Left meant labor. You'd be worked to death over the next few months, but you'd live for now. Right meant immediate death in the gas chambers. The old, the young, the sick, pregnant women, anyone who looked too weak to work. Right. Most people's fate was sealed in about 30 seconds. But there was one group Mengele always pulled aside personally. Twins. Josef Mengele was absolutely obsessed with twins. As a physician and geneticist, he believed that studying identical twins was the key to unlocking the secrets of human genetics. If he could figure out what made twins identical, maybe he could crack the code on how to mass-produce the perfect Aryan race. Blonde hair, blue eyes, strong bodies, all of it on demand. Heinrich Himmler loved this idea. So Mengele was given unlimited resources, an endless supply of human subjects, and complete freedom to do whatever he wanted. What followed was the darkest chapter of medical history. Mengele kept his twins in special barracks. Separated from the rest of the camp, they got better food, they didn't have to do hard labor. The children even called him Uncle Mengele because he would bring them candy and chocolates. He'd pat them on the head and smile. He seemed kind. He seemed like he actually cared about them. Then the experiments began. Mengele injected chemicals directly into children's eyes, trying to change their color from brown to blue. When that didn't work, he tried different chemicals, and different ones after that. Children went blind. Some died from infections. Mengele just made notes and moved on to the next pair. He had plenty more twins to work with. He sewed twins together back to back, trying to surgically create conjoined twins. The children screamed in agony for days before dying of gangrene. He injected twins with diseases, typhus, tuberculosis, malaria, then killed them at different stages of infection so he could compare how their organs responded. He performed surgeries without anesthesia just to document how the human body reacted to pain. Not because anesthesia wasn't available, he just wanted to see what would happen. And here's the worst part. When one twin died, Mengele would immediately kill the other one, sometimes with a chloroform injection straight to the heart, so he could perform side-by-side autopsies while both bodies were still fresh. An estimated 3,000 twins passed through Mengele's hands at Auschwitz. Fewer than 200 survived. And now for the part that still makes people's blood boil 80 years later. Josef Mengele was never punished. Not even a little bit. When the Soviets liberated Auschwitz in January 1945, Mengele was already long gone. He'd fled west, gotten captured by American forces, and then, here's the kicker, he was released. Somehow, nobody realized they had the Angel of Death in custody. His name was on wanted lists everywhere, and they just let him walk out. For the next 34 years, Mengele lived as a free man. He moved to Argentina, then Paraguay, then Brazil. He worked as a farmhand. He went swimming at the beach. He probably read about himself in the newspaper. Israeli intelligence came close to catching him several times, but always arrived just a little too late. On February 7, 1979, Josef Mengele went swimming at a beach in Petiot, Brazil. He suffered a stroke in the water and drowned. He was 67 years old. He died a free man, having never spent a single day in prison for torturing and murdering thousands of children. His remains weren't even confirmed until 1985, when his body was finally exhumed and identified through dental records. For years after the war, survivors of his experiments had testified at trials, pointing at photographs, describing in horrifying detail exactly what he'd done to them. And the whole time, Mengele was living under a fake name in South America, completely untouchable. The world couldn't even give his victims the satisfaction of seeing him face justice. So there you have it. 3 doctors who took their medical training and used it for the exact opposite of what it was meant for. Holmes turned murder into a real estate investment. Petiot turned genocide into a get-rich-quick scheme. And Mengele turned children into lab rats. The next time you're sitting in a doctor's office, try not to think about any of this. Actually, you know what? I'm sure your doctor is totally normal. Probably.